Good evening. It's 6:30. This is the Municipality of Anchorage Planning and Zoning Commission. Clerk, will you take roll, please?
Ms. Yoshimura?
Here.
Ms. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Ferguson?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Spring?
Here.
Mr. Strike? Ms. Barker?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
We have no
Thank you.
minutes for this evening. Before we go to disclosures, Mr. Commissioner Robinson, would you like to handle the reorganization of the agenda, please?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chair. Matter of cases 2014-031 S 12056-1 and S 12055-1, all by the petitioner Outlets of Alaska. I move that we postpone those cases indefinitely.
Any objection? Saying here none, that we will do that. Are you going to continue?
Yes, in the matter of case 2014-009, Municipality of Anchorage, related to Clutina Village Overlay District, I move that we postpone the case till May 5th.
Okay. Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, so moved.
Continuing on in the matter of case 2014-029, petitioner Municipality of Anchorage, the matter of amending code to deal with the uses considered severe alcohol-dependent housing and traditional use facility. I move that we postpone to April 14th.
Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, so moved.
And finally, Mr. Chair, in the matter of case 2014-042, petitioner Atlas Tower Holdings, LLC, conditional use for a cell or wireless communication tower, I move that we postpone to May 12th, 2014.
Any objection? Seeing none, so moved. Seeing and hearing none, so moved. Commissioner Dean, will you handle the disclosures, please?
Commissioner Spring, do you have anything to disclose?
Yes, in the matter of Resolution 2012-040, I did not attend the meeting and therefore will not be voting on that resolution.
Thank you. Commissioner, I'm sorry?
Commissioner Spring, did you receive a memo from Ms. Blake on March 24th?
I believe I did. I was out of town, I think, that day, but I did read it later, I believe.
Advice were given is that members are not required to listen to the audio prior to approval of a resolution in a situation such as turnover members where no quorum can exist to take the action. I guess, would that apply, I'm looking at staff, would that apply in Mr. Spring's case or not?
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that there are no longer 5 commissioners who were present at the time this case was approved, and such, and thus all commissioners can vote on this resolution.
On that one, but the one that Mr. Spring was not at, even though it's on the consent agenda, can he or can he not vote on that item on the consent agenda?
I'm sorry, could you tell me the case number again?
Mr. Spring?
It's the resolution, first resolution.
Are there 5 other members?
I'm going to say yes.
Oh, then yes, he should not vote on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Continue, Ms. Dean.
Commissioner Yoshimura?
No.
I think you need to, if we excused Commissioner Spring from voting on 2012-040?
No, I'm still confused. We are excusing him from?
I think we should.
Okay. So I move for Commissioner Spring to not hear this particular case.
No, I think we got to make it a positive. So we move to,
For him to hear it and
Yeah,
then
and vote
go ahead
against
and
it.
vote against it. Okay. So I'll move for that.
okay, do we have a second? This is a motion to direct him. We have a second on it. Now, if you vote against this, then he will not participate, and he was not here. So let's try using our machines for practice, which we just lost, okay? I can't cop a break. That motion failed because we did not get 5 votes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
can we take a poll of how many commissioners participated in that case?
2012-040, when was that?
I thought this was the case that we've been waiting for Mr. Mulcahy to drop off.
That is correct.
So then
Okay, then Lori's
everybody
memo-
should vote on this one.
Yeah, okay. Per Lori's memo, then everyone can vote on that one. You vote on that one. Okay. Thank you very much, Erica.
So do I need to withdraw the motion then for,
Well, it failed, but
so he can go ahead and
Vote.
vote?
Okay, it
So there
worked
you
out
go.
right.
We're good. Okay. Commissioner Yoshimura.
No.
And Commissioner Barker, do you have anything?
Well, it looks like the first one is moot. I was, as Mr. Spring was, I was not present for the presentation on 2012-040, but however, in the matter of 2014-010, I want to disclose again that I work for the organization that sponsors Carlock Manor, and I was recused from that particular hearing.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one again?
2014-010.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Should not be voting on it at this time, I don't think.
Okay. Well, I move
further.
for Commissioner Barker to vote on this issue.
we need a second.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I apologize for interrupting, but I don't think you need to vote for a commissioner not to vote on a resolution if the commissioner wasn't voting on the case. They can just disclose that they won't be voting on that, and you can move on.
I think that's so much.
Great, thank
We'll
you.
follow your advice.
Great. Okay, Commissioner Robinson.
Yes, in the matter of case 2014-044, site plan review in Creekside Town Center, I would like to disclose that my company, Cook Inlet Housing Authority, sold the tract in question, Tract 4, to the petitioner for the purposes of constructing the Walgreens. We continue to own Tracts 15, 11, and 12 in Creekside Town Center and are part of a general partnership on 13 and 14 as well.
Are you a substantial part of the present action?
No, I and we are not.
Would you have any direct or substantial change to the outcome?
Would I have any, I didn't understand the question. Would I?
Would you have any effect directly or substantially with the outcome?
Would I be affected one way or another by the outcome? I don't believe so. Others may.
Others may, that maybe somebody else may feel you maybe?
I'll defer to, that's right.
Okay. Any immediate and known or conjectural and dependent on factors beyond the body's action?
No.
Okay. Significant monetarily?
As the transaction has taken place in the past, so moving forward, no.
generally possessed by a large group or only by the individual? I would say no. Yes?
I guess no, although I don't quite understand. I am part of an organization, not individually represented there, so within that context.
It wouldn't affect you. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead to move to have Tyler hear the case.
May I have a second? Thank you.
So shall we vote, or is there any
Do I
objection?
hear any objections to Tyler participating? Seeing and hearing no objection, Tyler, you're directed to participate.
And Commissioner Walker, do you have anything to disclose?
Yes. Let's see. Can you hear me? Consent agenda items D, E, and F, resolution 2014-006, 014-010, and 2014-011. I was not present for the hearing when those, so anyway, I shouldn't vote on those three.
Give me those numbers, please. Again, please.
Consent agenda items D, E, and F. So 006, 010, and 011, the last three on the consent agenda.
Oh, wait, 006. Okay, that one. You were not here the night, so those were discussed.
Correct.
I'm looking at Eric again, or Ms. McConnell again. Your advice?
Mr. Chair, if Mr. Walker did not participate in the case, he should not vote on the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear any objection to that? Mr. Walker, you're not to vote on those three when they come up.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not done yet. With respect to item number 5 on the, is this on the consent agenda? This is item, actually this is other, case 2014-043, the draft design study report for the Academy Drive, Vanguard Drive, traffic circulation improvements. My family owns a commercial site that's impacted by this project, and I've been actively working with PM&E and traffic to resolve some issues that are going to impact our property, and I don't think that I should vote on this one either.
So in this case, we should go ahead and vote to have you participate. So I'm going to motion for that. Anybody want to second that? Okay. So we all need to vote.
Okay. That motion went down to defeat. Tyler, you're to recluse yourself when that one comes up.
Okay. Commissioner Ferguson, do you have anything to disclose?
No, I do not.
And I have nothing to disclose either.
Okay. I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, how would you like us to pull items from the consent agenda?
After we'll take a motion, we'll take a second, then we'll pull the items.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spring, did you wish to speak? Well, let's have a motion first on that. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? I have a motion. I have a second. Okay. Commissioner Spring, what item would you like to pull?
I'd like to pull Resolution 2014-11 and cases 2014-44 and 2014-43.
Give me the number, the letter there, please, if you will.
Consent agenda item 1F, 3, and 5.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any item they want to pull on the consent agenda? Commissioner Robinson.
Yes, I'd like to pull item D1D, Resolution 2014-006.
Thank you. Any other items to be pulled on the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none. Any objection to approving the rest of the consent agenda? Seeing and hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. Okay, we'll go in order. Commissioner Robinson, you asked to pull D1D. Would you go ahead, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, you know, this case related to the public facility site plan review, South High School, I think there's still some questions whether the resolution accurately reflects the transcript and the deliberation of the commission, and I do believe that you know, there's potentially a need to sit down with staff or in a further committee situation and work on that resolution. So I would move that we move the resolution to May 5th.
Is that in the form of a motion, please?
It is.
May I have a second, please? I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on moving that item to May 5th? Any objection to moving that item to May 5th? Seeing and hearing none, that item for Resolution 2014-006 is moved to May 5th. Mr. Spring, Resolution 2014-011.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2014-11, striking one sentence in paragraph 3, the last sentence, which reads, "For specific population calculations for Kincaid Elementary School."
Hang on one second, please. Okay, thank you. Go ahead. What
Yeah,
page?
just to comment on that motion.
What
well, you
do
need,
you want
you need
strike
a second, I guess, before I comment, right?
Pardon?
You need a second before I comment.
Okay, I have a second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a little picky, I suppose, but we didn't actually get population calculations for Kincaid Elementary School. We did request it. It turns out that the school district doesn't have a demographer any longer, and they weren't able to obtain that information. So I just want to clarify that we didn't receive that and strike that sentence.
So your motion is to approve that resolution after striking paragraph,
Last sentence in paragraph 3.
which reads specific population calculations for Kincaid EIS?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any objection or discussion on that item? Seeing none, that resolution is approved with that revision. Okay, the next item is case 2014-044, Creekside Holdings LLC. Tyler, you had a conflict, but that was not accepted, so you're still in on that. Mr. Spring, you pulled that, so what's your discussion?
Well, I would, it's apparent to me, based on the staff report, that this particular site plan is, I'm sorry, what's that?
I was just, not to cut you off, but I wouldn't mind actually having a staff presentation
That's what I
on
was
this
going
case.
to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you
Exactly.
very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Before we start, can we have a staff presentation on that item? Thank you, Commissioner Tyler. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for Creekside Holdings LLC to construct a 2,380 square foot fast food drive-through restaurant on the west portion of the site located at the southeast corner of Creekside Center Drive and DeBar Road. The subject 2-acre property is currently developed with a constructed retail building with Walgreens drugstore as a tenant. The building is sited on the east corner of Track 4, and they're proposing to site on the west corner of that subject property. To the west of Creekside Center Drive is a middle school. To the east are platted, undeveloped commercial tracts. Properties to the south are within the business PUD, but are designated mixed residential. Mixed residential development is constructed on Track 13. Townhouse condos are under construction on 14, and Track 15 is vacant. North of the subject property is Alaska USA Federal Credit Union, a restaurant, and Fred Meyer store. Under the review process of this, it falls under AO 2001-24S. There's a specific requirement in there that ordinance placed special limitations on development of the property. It requires that there should be a public hearing site plan review for each phase of development, and the location of fast food and/or drive-through style restaurants along Muldoon or DeBar roads must be approved by Assembly. Development design guidelines were approved through the business PUD process, and the Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution 2008-40 for the site plan review of the Walgreens directed that additional construction on the site be reviewed by PZC for site plan review on the consent agenda. This is condition number 10, found on page 78 of the staff packet, where Walgreens site plan is included in the history. The department recommends approval of the site plan for the referenced site, subject to the conditions 1 through 9, found on page 14 and 15 of the staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Spring?
Do we hear the petitioner in this case? We don't. It's not a public hearing, right? So we don't hear the petitioner?
That would be my understanding. Is that a correct assumption, staff?
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, this is not a public hearing, but if you desire to ask questions of the petitioner, you may do so.
Is the petitioner here? Okay.
I think it'd be appropriate to hear the petitioner. There's particular questions I have regarding the site plan layout. The conflict appears to be with PUD requirements and the need to orient the building towards the street in particular. That'll be Creekside and DeBar. And the way it's currently oriented is the drive-through will actually separate the building from the two frontage streets, thereby not meeting the intent of the PUD. So I guess I have a question regarding the flexibility in the site plan and what could be done to adhere to the PUD requirements.
You going to address that question to the petitioner or the staff?
It would be a petitioner question.
Okay. Would you please come to the mic and state your name, state and spell your name, please?
My name is Todd Peterson. Last name is spelled Peterson.
Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, the site plan shows a drive-through around the perimeter of the building, between the building and DeBar and Creekside. I guess my question is, one of the conditions of approval that they have, that the staff has recommended in the staff report, is to revise the site plan to orient the building towards those two streets, DeBar and Creekside. And I guess my question is, can that be done? And in your opinion, is it feasible?
The difficulty of it is with the setup that we had with Walgreens, having to move that building further east will start to interfere with their parking, and it could create some conflicts with having an orientation towards those main streets. The main reason we focused the entrance to this building back in to the development was with the additional development of townhouses and other buildings, we wanted to make it more appealing to the remainder of the development that's going on there. And we thought that, instead of having an orientation towards that corner, it might be more appealing to orient an entrance back towards the remainder of the development that's going on behind us, to the south and to the east.
So you think that would be preferable to the orientation to the street?
I believe it would, yes.
There's also some requirements in the conditions for additional sidewalk access points. Is that going to be a problem, or is that something you can?
We will try to accommodate it. Some of the access points out to DeBar, because of the location of both easements and the drive-through, we didn't feel like it was safe to have pedestrians crossing a drive-through right at the entry point to it. But we will work with staff to do whatever they believe is appropriate.
Okay. So all the questions I have.
Commissioner Robinson?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for staff and then one for the petitioner as well. But first question is just trying to understand the kind of framework we're dealing with here. You have the SL, the rezoning requires a public hearing site plan review for each phase of the development, but you have a resolution from the Planning Commission that this development does not have to come back. So that supersedes the zoning in this case. This is not considered a subsequent phase of development.
Through the chair, Commissioner Robinson, this tract or lot, which includes the Walgreens, these outbuildings are not on a separate tract, and so the Walgreens came through with a site plan review, a public hearing site plan review, and it showed both the Walgreens building and actually 2 potential outbuildings on the site. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved that site plan for 3 buildings, but it said that at the time, and thus through that public hearing fulfilled the requirement of the SL on the zoning, and then said at the time that the outbuildings were developed that the site plan should come back through on the consent agenda. So it's staff's determination that the special limitation for a public hearing was satisfied at the time of Walgreens, and this is kind of a subsidiary action to that.
But the building in question, or some form of building in question, was originally contemplated on that approved concept plan. Can you direct me to where that original concept is in the packet?
Page 78. It shows 2 retail pads on the west side of the lot.
Okay. Thank you. The next question I had is, I think, related to this orientation question. So the site plan in Creekside Town Center zoning, if you will, had this idea that the buildings would orient themselves to the principal streets, which would be DeBar, Muldoon, and Creekside Center Drive, I think. The petitioner has indicated that it's somewhat problematic to be oriented there and would like a more internal focus. There's not a lot else that's been built there commercially. Do you believe that we have the ability to approve a site plan that is not oriented to those streets?
Well, through the chair, Mr. Robinson, it says greatest extent possible should be oriented to the streets, so I believe the option is there if this is the best possible layout design and it works with the rest of the design layout for the Walgreens and future tracks, then I believe you can accept it.
Okay. And I guess final, and I guess it's a comment more than anything, but I'd welcome the petitioner's response to it. There are a number of staff recommendations to offer changes, those ones that Mr. Spring just sort of ran through and we talked to you about. So in effect, we'd be approving a site plan with a lot of unanswered items right now. And I guess I also know what time of year it is, and I'm presuming that, and maybe this is a question, do you intend to build this summer?
Yes, our intention is to build it as quickly as possible.
So what would be the quickest that you could come back with an amended site plan addressing staff's requests so that we can feel comfortable that you've met these requirements and still maintain some schedule?
Are you thinking that we would then have a additional hearing like this one to determine whether it was approved or not?
Again, this is my questioning, is not the body's, statement that we're asking you to come back, but I'm sort of wrestling with this notion that there's a lot of things that really would lead to changes. They're basically saying, staff is saying there's 2 elevations of your buildings that don't really meet the purpose. We've got a drive-through that may or may not be located correctly, and I know the idea is ultimately this has to go to the assembly, so that's another time pinch on your part. You got pedestrian connections. I mean, you effectively got all the things that we would normally look at in a site plan are still unanswered, and so that's my problem with just sitting here saying, yeah, go forth and work it out, I guess, but I'm just posing the question, would you be able to get it together enough to bring it back next month and still maintain your schedule?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dean.
Through the chair, did you have any other issues with anything else on the recommendations from the planning department?
To be honest with you, I have not received the recommendations from the planning department.
Okay, mine is dated April 7th. I'm not sure we had these for about a week now. And you haven't seen this?
They have not been forwarded to me as of yet.
Oh. So actually, you're making a promise to do something within a month, and you haven't even seen what you're promising.
Well, my team has the ability to go through things pretty quickly, so
Right, I
there may be
understand
some
that.
things that we can't do, and I would come back to you and say this is something that we're not able to do, but the things that we can accommodate, we would be able to turn around inside of 2 weeks.
I do have a question for you. On one of the items, it says, please note to indicate that snow will be removed from the site within 24 hours of a snowfall event. It does not say how much snow, and I was wondering if you had a particular amount that you normally deal with. Is it 3 inches?
At this point, if it were the way that Walgreens works on their situations and the way that this would work as well, as we'd use the same snow vendor, if it reached a point that it was going to pile up and create any kind of a disruption of the parking, it would be removed.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any further questions? Don't run off. I have a couple questions. This was submitted under the old Title 21, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Condition 3 on page 14, parking lot lighting illumination levels shall not exceed an average of 2.5-foot candles in accordance with IEC recommended practices. Is that requirement in the old Title 21?
To my knowledge, Mr. Chair, that's old Title 21, correct?
If I could
Ms. McConnell?
add on to what Mr. Odell said, that condition comes from the Walgreens resolution as well, to be consistent on the whole site.
Okay, thank you. Condition 5, and I think this speaks to the heart of the issue that Commissioner Robinson started down, is provide a pedestrian connection from DeBar Road to the building entrance, which would cross the drive-through, from a proposed building to Walgreens, and I don't know if that is just a striped walkway or whether that's a raised walkway or what that is, and from Grass Creek to the road to the building, which would also, in my opinion, cross the walkway or cross the drive-through lane. Has there been any thought as to exactly how those would occur or where they would occur by staff?
Mr. Chair, taking a look at it, to DeBar Road, they are over on their parking, so they might be able to lose one parking spot to provide the pedestrian connection there, just outside of the drive-through. and then the connection between the restaurant and Walgreens could be delineated, striped, or I believe in the original Walgreens, page 70, let me get that for you. Page 78, they showed some pedestrian connections on the interior. And it's looks like it's just striped. So striped or raised or delineated in some way.
I see an access back to DeBar, where they would go back to DeBar, down the sidewalk of DeBar, and to this facility. Is that what is intended, or this reads to the building, DeBar Road to building entrance? And so I'm a little bit, I don't think we have a clear understanding of what that requirement means.
Mr. Chair, they have on the site plan, they show a connection between, to the building from Creekside Center Drive to the building. And if they just provided a connection from DeBar straight to the building with some sort of sidewalk, either delineated or raised.
I see the connection, but it crosses the drive-through.
That it does.
And seeing other similar pedestrian crossings, they're not the safest, easiest, anything else good about them. And I'm just trying to understand and bring the applicant's attention to, what these are. I mean, those drive-throughs in winter get icy, very icy, and they're difficult to plow, and so, there are just some issues there. And I mean, I think we are creating a problem rather than solving a problem with that one in particular. Okay, also, paragraph 8G on page 15, provide a note to indicate that snow will be removed from the site within 72 hours of a snow event. Where did that requirement come from?
Or delineate areas of snow storage is added to that, Mr. Chair. That's a requirement that was put on the Walgreens as well. That's in their condition of approval as well.
Where would I see that in this packet?
Let's see. I don't believe that the original conditions of approval were added in this packet.
I'm sorry, I think it's on page 31.
Yes, Erica is correct. 31, number 4.
To the applicant, what that says is not exactly what you described. And I understand what you described is a common practice in this town, but it does not follow exactly what that says. Another question for staff is number 9 is, to my thinking, a new item. I'm not familiar to seeing that, and I wondered where that one came from also.
Okay, Mr. Chair, that came, page 63, that came from the Department of Health and Services. They're requesting that a dust control plan be submitted to DHHS. That I'm not sure if that's a new policy or if that's been in effect for a while or not.
We have Title 21. We have Design Criteria Manual. How do we know what new policies they are attending? Or I mean, that's a total new item. It's the first time I can remember seeing it.
Agreed. It's comments from DHHS that were received. They don't mention any air quality
I mean, they don't give any basis for that? They don't give any findings for that?
Not in their comments section, no, they didn't. We would request the CUP approval.
Question for staff. I see the requirement, so I understand why you put it in, but I'm a little bit befuddled by, you know, the lack of a process to provide some sort of a public comment on something like that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that's not a condition I've seen come from the DHHS before. They may have something in their code with respect to that issue, but we would need to confer with them a bit more to see why they believe that that was appropriate, because quite frankly, that's the first time I've seen a comment like that.
I would like to have a discussion with them or something to expand that before we accept it, because from experience, those quickly become very cumbersome to comply with on it. Anyone have any further questions for staff or the applicant? Thank you very much, sir. You can have a seat. Ms. Dean.
I just had a question of staff. Could somebody please tell us why the petitioner did not have a copy of the department recommendations that we've had for over a week?
Through the chair, Ms. Dean, the petitioner's out of town, and maybe we mail it out at the same time. I'm not real sure why he did not receive a staff report.
So it was mailed a week and a half ago. Is that what you're saying?
To my knowledge, yes, it was mailed out.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? What is the wish of the body? Commissioner Spring.
I'll move to postpone the case to the first meeting in, what is this, April? First meeting in May, in order to allow the petitioner to submit revised site plans to address the items that are contained in the staff report.
Do we have a second? We have a second. Mr. Robinson, thank you. Any comments or discussion?
I'll be glad to comment. I share Commissioner Robinson's concern about approving a site plan that has so many requirements for revision. I just can't, I think it's our responsibility to know what we're approving, and we can't just devolve that responsibility to staff. It's something that I think has come up several times since I've been on the commission, and I think I've been consistent, in my opinion, about the need to review site plans and approve a site plan that we see in front of us.
Could you possibly find room to maybe provide some input from DHHS on their new requirement?
I would. I could share your concern on that, and I'm concerned because I don't think it's fair to impose a specific new requirement on a new building site plan when it hasn't been applied previously, and we don't know if it's going to be applied in the future.
And on this one particularly, when there were things that were carried forward from Walgreens against the applicant, but they'd also added new requirements that weren't on Walgreens on that. Any other discussion? Commissioner Robinson? Okay. We have a motion. We have a second. Let's use our machines. Please vote. Okay, the motion carries. this will come back before us, and we'll try to get it into the agenda just as soon as we can. Anything else before we proceed? Thank you. Okay, the next item is case 2014-043, draft design study report for the Academy Drive, Vanguard Drive. May we have a staff report, please?
Project Management and Engineering is requesting a draft design study report approval of the alignment for the connection of Academy Drive, Vanguard Drive to Abbott Road. This project is done in collaboration with the ADOT's Seward Highway 92nd Avenue grade separation, which is designed to help alleviate congestion in the Diamond Boulevard Seward Highway area. The ADOT 92nd Avenue project will construct an additional east-west route for vehicle trips to extend 92nd Avenue under the Seward Highway and connect to Academy Drive. The existing Academy Drive and Vanguard Drive roadways are not designed to handle the expected traffic volumes that will result from this future connection to 92nd Avenue, and the project goal is to upgrade the road to a Class 2 minor arterial standard. The upgrade will include providing pedestrian and bicycle facilities to improve connectivity and to evaluate and balance, to the extent practical, impacts to local access, businesses, and adjacent neighborhoods. There were 5 alternatives that were looked at, and alternative E was eliminated because it would require new on-off ramps, and that would be detrimental to the established businesses in the area, and it required more acquisition of private property than any of the other alternatives. Alternative A was eliminated as the route would follow the existing road alignment, would require a stop sign at the Academy Vanguard intersection. This stop sign would prohibit or not allow the connector road to function as a minor arterial, so that alternative was eliminated as well. And alternative D was eliminated because when the road was constructed, after the road was constructed, plus minus 375 feet of the road would have to be reconstructed to meet the change in grade for the new existing underpass that is being constructed by the state of Alaska. B and C were also considered, and they were considered reasonable alternatives. However, B is the recommended alternative because it provides queuing length to ensure that traffic does not block the Independence Drive intersection, because there's 1,080 feet queuing length. With a public access easement on the east side of Abbott Road, it facilitates access to businesses, ingress and egress as well. It results in the fewest changes to business access on both the east and west sides of Abbott Road, and the estimated cost for alternative B is less than that of alternative C. Funding is going to be a combination of local road bonds and state grants. The lighting system is going to be a white light system in accordance with the design criteria manual, and the landscaping is shown on the figure 12. It shows a typical cross-section of a 44 to 51 foot cross-section, constructed roadway with 2 11-foot travel lanes, 3.5-foot bike lanes on the outside of the travel lanes with curb and gutter, a grass 0 to 7-foot separation distance between a 5-foot wide sidewalk on one side and an 8-foot wide pathway on the other side of the roadway. The overall goal of the landscape design is to limit impacts to existing vegetation there. The plan describes quite an inventory of the existing natural vegetation, and efforts are being made to preserve the natural old-growth vegetation wherever possible, and to provide new landscaping where space allows. The figure on page 48 shows the areas for preservation of existing vegetation and the proposed reseeding and planting of the disturbed areas. The department does recommend approval of the draft design study report recommendation of alternative B for the alignment of the connection of Academy Drive, Vanguard Drive to Abbott Road, subject to one condition on page 4, which is conformance with the information that was supplied to the Planning and Zoning Commission with this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Dean.
Through the chair, could staff please tell us what is the boundaries or the limits of the area that's going to be affected? Are we looking at all the way to Brayton, or is this going to end just a few feet past Vanguard? There's a lot of different maps here, and some of them, there's even one map that goes all the way through and has the roundabouts underneath the new Seward and all the way to Old Seward. So I'm a little confused as to where it ends. And if they're being phased, if they're two different sections, how is this all being handled? I mean, what exactly are we supposed to be looking at tonight?
Figure 5, following page 12 of the report, shows the circulation access, and it's the existing conditions that they're looking at. The state of Alaska is going to be building the underpass, raising the Seward Highway, and they're actually going to be building the underpass. So what is being done is the Academy Drive is the alignment that is shown on figure 13 following page 51. The magenta is the alignment that is being recommended.
Could you tell me the exact border, though? Because, it does show the alternative E going all the way through. What I'm getting at is that there's a lot of properties that would be affected depending on where that border ends. So, what are we doing? And if it is affecting all of these people's homes, I would think this would need to be a public hearing. And if we're going to go ahead and do all the way to Old Seward, that's a whole bunch more homes. I counted 38.
The area that is being affected, if you look on figure 13, the red has been eliminated. So the magenta crosses the parcel labeled 19, which is not a home, and it crosses parcel 19, and it extends across that one parcel, and it connects with Vanguard Drive to ultimately connect to Abbott Loop. So the petitioner's representative can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is one parcel that appears to be affected by this alignment.
So how can we be sure that the scope won't creep to the west? Once they start widening the road and they put the sidewalks and the bike paths in, I mean, are they just going to abruptly just end and the widening of the road will just end? I mean, they're going to have to feather it and make it transition.
Well, through the Mr. Chair, Ms. Dean, those are technical questions that I really would have to defer to the road designers who are here tonight.
Okay.
But if there's one parcel that is affected by this, there are not any residential homes. The red line is being eliminated, and the green was eliminated. They were selecting the alignment that would affect the least number of parcels, provide the best access to existing established businesses, and would provide the most convenient access without damaging access to businesses. There was a community meeting with businesses whereby the technical crew, the designers, met with the businesses to talk to them about access and the road alignment and what would serve them best.
So what is the next step after our meeting tonight? What would be the next step in this process?
This probably won't happen for 5 years because the state DOT project has to be complete before this can be accomplished.
When you say the state DOT project, are you referring to the actual underpass and all of that?
That is correct.
So the underpass happens first, and then all the residential lots would obviously be affected fairly quickly before the commercial lots would be affected on the Academy area. Am I understanding the steps correctly?
I do not know if the underpass is going to affect any residential lots.
If you look on figure 3, there's 38 houses that will be affected on both sides of New Seward. It's pretty serious. I'm just trying to understand the progress and how the step-by-step process is going to happen on this. And
Where's figure 3?
38 lots, Mr. Chair.
if you look and you count the trailers, there's 23 trailers that would have to go away, and then there's 15 houses on the other side. It is a combination of trailers and houses on between Old Seward and New Seward. It's R5 zoning. I'll be real blunt and say this. I don't understand why the alignment is going to the south and taking residential properties when the land to the north is vacant. Why are we taking existing residential properties instead of taking vacant commercial property? I don't understand.
I'm completely lost. Mr. Chair, I'm completely lost.
On figure 3.
Figure 3 follows page 5. And
Mr. Chair, Ms. Dean, I believe you are referring to alignments that are not part of the project that this DSR is about. You're talking about the state project, and this DSR, as I understand it, is only for the municipal phase of this project.
That's what I was trying to understand, exactly what the process and the phasing will be on this particular project, but they do provide us with drawings of what the plan is for the New Seward connection. So I'm trying to understand exactly what we will be doing will affect all of the other stuff down the road when it goes across.
Mr. Chair, over here. Do we have representation by CRW in the audience? Could we maybe invite them to come up? I think they might have some of the answers that you're
Okay.
looking for.
Can you come forward, please?
Thank you.
I'm Erica Jensen with CRW.
Bill Johnson, CRW.
Thank you. Can you address Commissioner Springs, or Commissioner, Park? Stacy Dean's questions, please.
So do I need to stand in front of the mic or, okay. I know there's been a couple of questions, and maybe I'll just first clarify the two different projects. I think that's probably important. But the area in pink is the proposed DOT project, and that's proposed for about the year 2020 for construction. The municipal projects are the different alternatives that we were talking about, are the ones in red or in color below that, connecting to Academy Drive. And so what the city was tasked to do was to figure out that connection from the end of the DOT project, which is again in the pink, which goes down to Academy, the intersection of Academy Vanguard, and so that's the alternatives that we came up with. And depending on which alternative we chose, would impact more, would go further to the west. And I forget the other questions.
My questions had to do with the phasing of the project.
Oh, right.
It looks to me like when I'm looking at Figure 3, Phase 1 is actually between New Seward and Old Seward, and Phase 2 is between Old Seward and Vanguard, or New Seward and Vanguard. And then, you know, the Vanguard intersection, that's going to get developed after the overpass is completed?
So the first step will be this municipal project, and the goal will be to get that connection finished prior to the DOT project. We don't want them going at the same time, and we definitely can't have the city project being constructed after the state project, because then we'd have more traffic and not been able to handle it. So the goal is to have the city project finished, ideally a year or so ahead of the DOT project.
Ahead of Phase 2 of the DOT project. Phase 1 of the DOT project, which is from Old Seward to the off-ramp, they're in right-of-way acquisition currently, so that will be constructed.
You're going to have to speak to the mic, please.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Phase 1 of the DOT project from Old Seward to the off-ramps of Seward Highway is currently in right-of-way acquisition. Phase 2 is projected to be constructed in 2020. The municipality wants to construct the connection from the end of the DOT project to Abbott Road to accommodate all that traffic that's going to come with the undercrossing. So our project is independent of DOT's project. We're just trying to connect it to Abbott and not leave it at a stop sign, which is where the DOT project currently does end.
Are you also in the design for the other underpass?
No, the design for the DOT project is
It's
separate.
a different company?
Yes.
Okay. So I still am not totally clear on the border of where our project ends.
The extent of our project ends based on the different alternatives, which was one of the reasons that we eliminated alternative E, the red one, because we would have to go all the way to Brayton Drive. We also eliminated alternative D because of that as well. We had to dive down really deep to get underneath the highway where they're going to be connecting. It was one of our factors in how far our project limits are. So the extent of the lines show where the connection could happen based on the different alternative.
If I could summarize what I think you just said, is that this project has 2 DOT phases and 1 municipal phase.
Correct.
Phase 1 of the DOT is between Old Seward and New Seward, and that impacts most of the residential that Commissioner Dean was concerned about.
Yes.
Okay. Then Phase 2 is the main line of New Seward in that area.
Phase 2 crosses under the Seward Highway.
Okay, it's under the sewer highway there, and then after those two phases are built, then this phase would kick in, and we would complete the work from Vanguard to the new Seward.
Ideally, our connection from Vanguard to Abbott would happen before the undercrossing, because there will be a lot of traffic generated with the undercrossing.
Okay.
So ideally, it would be constructed just before.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Ms. Dean, do you have any further questions? Commissioner Spring.
Yes, I think this is a really good project, really needed for this area amid of South Anchorage, in as much that there's been a lot of development there in the last 20 years, and the infrastructure is way behind. And this is, I think, really going to help improve the congestion, particularly in the area of the old Seward Highway and Diamond, because it's going to allow a bypass around that congested area, and get to the Diamond Mall and all those big box stores there on the old Seward Highway. So it's not our job really to comment on the need for it, but I just wanted to state that, I think, for the record, that it is a really good project. The only thing we have to recommend, I think, is whether you pick the right alternative. And I think you probably have. I think it is a good alternative, probably more, given that it's a minor arterial and you have to maintain some continuity in the travel flow from one end to the other. I think it's good without unnecessary stop and go movements. But I do have a question about the projections that are in the page 36 of the design study report. If I had to guess, I'd say that your estimate of the traffic on Academy Drive is probably pretty close, the 9,500. But I don't know I'm not certain about that. But it looks like the figures, though, the reason I'm questioning that is because of the figures on Abbott that you show for 2035 seem to be less than the existing, or in some cases. And I know it will divert some of the traffic from the Abbott, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be diverting. It's not going to be less than the amount that's on Abbott now. But
Yeah, I mean, they are projections, and they're, if we go on 20 years from now and actually count the cars, we'll know then for sure. But to me, it makes sense because the underpass will, folks that are in that area of town won't have to go through Diamond and Abbott to get over the Diamond Center. They can just take that straight shot. So it should take cars off that portion of Abbott Road, or that's Diamond, or Hartsel there, Diamond Hartsel.
yes, but there's that one segment between Academy Drive and Independence on Abbott, which is before the cutoff. You're coming from the hillside and going down Abbott towards the west and north, and you pass Independence Drive. The current traffic count is 21,000, and you predict 19,000 in 2035. I don't see how that cutoff is going to affect that traffic there on that segment and actually make it less than it is now. I could see how it would reduce the traffic further to the north, past 88th Avenue, which is currently like 35,000, and reduce it somewhat. But that's why I just raised a red flag, because of that particular number on that segment seems to be really low. And then I have to wonder about the figures for the Academy Drive, which is probably more important.
We also looked at the traffic study done by the DOT project, the 92nd Avenue, and they also did predict a lowering of traffic along that entire area. I don't know all the ins and outs of the model, but there are separate consultants did these traffic reports, and they both did predict that traffic would decrease along Abbott, especially north of the new connection, but they did both predict them to decrease south of it as well.
Well, another problem I have is that I don't see anything in any background report on the traffic projections. There's supposed to be Appendix D which I'm assuming it talks about traffic projections, and it's not in my report. I don't know if I missed something. Is there somewhere in this report that tells about the methodology, how he came up with the traffic projections?
No, I'm sorry, that is not in the report. I did not submit that. It was not in the list of things to submit. I'm sorry about that. But I do have the traffic report with all the backup and the tweaks they made to the models. They did change some of the nodes based on what is currently going on in the new developments.
I think that's important information. I'm not sure why it wasn't submitted, but I mean, typically we get that kind of information.
I didn't realize that. I'm sorry about that.
Anything further, Commissioner Spring? No. Commissioner Robinson?
Thank you. Just looking at the alternatives on Figure 13, as I understand it, A is being rejected because it has a stop sign, and that's not okay in minor arterials. Is that right?
Correct.
And so there's no other design. You can do a three-way roundabout there to keep traffic flow going, but still avoid acquisition of private property.
We did look at a roundabout. A roundabout does acquire more property, and it still also slows down vehicles, and the minor arterial is supposed to move the vehicles through, so we proposed not installing a roundabout in order to move traffic along the minor arterial and not require them to stop or slow.
So move real quick to Abbott and then sit at a stop sign there. Is that the idea?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
What happens when you get to Abbott eventually? Is there a signal or a stop sign?
Once the project is constructed, it would be stop controlled until the undercrossing of 92nd is constructed, and then it would be a signal.
Okay, so you hurry up and get to the signal. So the alternative B, where it shows kind of that from the intersection of Vanguard and Academy, and it shows it running, diagonal to the current street pattern, is the assumption there that Vanguard and Academy on either side of that would be vacated then? Is that how that would work?
Parcel 17 would be acquired in its entirety, and if it's sold to an adjacent property or retained by the municipality is still to be determined in the design phase and according to the adjacent properties' wishes and the municipality's wishes.
So I'm actually just looking at the roadway. So where basically alternative B veers off of Academy, and Academy continues on in its current alignment and then stops, right? So the current grid pattern that then goes on either side of that new alignment, can you just clarify? They would go away, correct?
Here and here. The existing, yes, those would be grass or not roadway.
Gotcha. And then the one final thing I just don't quite understand, why, if alternative E just follows the existing Academy, can you just explain why it extends farther? I just don't understand that distinction, that it extends farther than any of these other alternatives. To the west, I'm talking.
Right. It extends all the way to Brayton Drive, because if we construct E and make it the minor arterial, we would have to actually change DOT's on and off ramp configuration at that intersection. Currently, there's no northbound on-ramp. There's not enough weaving distance between northbound at the proposed 92nd and Diamond. If we take all the traffic off of Abbott to Diamond and put it onto our new roadway, we'd have to get them onto Seward Highway. So it extends all the way there for that reason.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Are you done, Commissioner Robinson? Are there any other further questions? Any questions for staff? Any questions for the applicant? What is the wish of the body? Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, in the matter of case 2014-043, Design Study Report, Academy Drive, Vanguard Drive, area traffic circulation improvements, I move that we accept the draft design study report as written with staff recommendations and the endorsement of alternatives B and C, and specifically B as the preferred alternative.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Spring, you have seconded. Thank you. Would you care to comment?
Mr. Chair, I'd simply say that the project provides a needed future connection in anticipation of a significant DOT roadway improvement. The alternatives analyzed did end up in two specifically preferred alternatives, and I do believe the reasons for rejecting A, D, and E right away are sound. I also think that the project is consistent with Anchorage 2020, the MTP, the OSNHP, and the PED, bike, and area-wide trails plans.
Thank you. Commissioner Spring?
Yes, I'll be supporting the motion for approval. I am disappointed that we did not receive the forecast documentation, and I believe that there might be some tweaking that might need to be done on that, and I'm not really comfortable with it, but I don't believe that if there was a new forecast that it would be significantly different regarding the amount of traffic on Academy. Enough more traffic that would require four lanes instead of two, or any change in the design, I still think would be much lower than a 4-lane capacity and under 18,000. So I'm okay with the fact that we don't have that documentation, but I was really close to not supporting the motion because of that.
Anyone else? I will be supporting the motion. One of my concerns, though, is in the case of erring on landscaping or giving the property back to a tax base, I would like to encourage you to give the property back to a tax base. It generates revenue, and we're currently struggling to maintain the landscaping we have. And so rather than have landscaping we would have to maintain, if we can take that property and sell it to the adjacent landowners and increase their tax base, I think the citizens are better served than a pocket of green here and a pocket of green there on that one. We have a motion. We have a second. Let's use our machines. Let's vote. The motion carries. Some findings, Mr. Robinson, and then Mr. Spring.
Well, I believe I indicated a couple, but I would simply add that the project's stated purpose is to provide an upgrade to minor arterial standards, provide pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, and I believe it does that, and I believe it also, through the alternatives, evaluated and balanced, to the extent that it could, the impacts to local businesses, access in neighborhoods.
Mr. Spring?
I'd just like to add that I think the proposed design does a good job of accommodating pedestrians and bicycles, and the recommended alternative. And given that it's a town center, it's very important, I think, for design of roads in this area in particular to have accommodations for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening. We've been meeting for about an hour and a half. Rather than start Ship Creek and then go to a postponement or go to a break, I think we'll take about a 7-minute break now and then come back, and we'll start with Ship Creek, and you guys can set up if you need to in the meantime. We will now take a 7-minute break.
No, yeah, I was definitely, I was working, sending emails. I'll tell you the story.
Case 2014-033, Master Plan Review, Ship Creek Framework Plan. May we have the staff report?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. John Cecil, CECIL, Senior Planner with the Long Range Planning Section, and I will be making the staff presentation this evening. I have a brief PowerPoint about the Ship Creek Framework Plan for you tonight. Copies of the PowerPoint were distributed to you, to each of you, and copies have been made available to the public. For the benefit of the new commissioners, and also perhaps to refresh the memories of the existing commissioners, I'd like to just briefly recap where we are in the process. So about 100 years ago, Ship Creek Basin was a tent city that housed the workers that built the Alaska Railroad. And the place we now know as Anchorage has grown from that time into a modern metropolitan center and transportation hub and a dynamic northern city of over 300,000 people, home to 40% of the state's population. So the next 50 years for Ship Creek holds the promise to become what's been called in the framework plan as the gateway to Alaska. So planning for the Ship Creek Basin and the creation of a new waterfront for Anchorage is not a new issue. In 1991, the municipality's Department of Economic Development and Planning prepared the Ship Creek Waterfront Land Use Plan, the objective of which highlighted Ship Creek's potential as a major visitor and residential attractor. This study is now 23 years old. Much of what was discussed in this document has been either accomplished or is no longer applicable. So in 2013, the Mayor's Office and the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation selected Kling Stubbins to prepare an update that was initially referred to as the Ship Creek Development Plan. And before discussing the specifics of the development plan, there are some other planning milestones you also need to be aware of. Because most of the property in the Ship Creek Basin is owned by the Alaska Railroad, there have been other significant planning efforts to achieve the vision and recommendations from the 1991 plan. These past efforts include a new zoning designation for planned community, zoning district, and the preparation of design guidelines. The Alaska Railroad, for its part, has also worked on a master plan for the new intermodal transportation center. So now let's fast forward to the year 2013. The development plan was first heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on November 4th of last year. The Commission expressed significant concerns about the content of certain aspects of the development plan, particularly in phases 1D and 3. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that these phases be removed from the plan because of their perceived lack of feasibility. And after taking public testimony and deliberating on the matter, the Commission made a recommendation of denial to the Assembly. After November, the consultants, and they're here in the audience tonight, revised the development plan and renamed it as a framework plan with the intent of supplementing but not replacing the 1991 plan. The consultants also responded to the concerns expressed by the Commission as well as staff, and these comments have been included in your packet tonight as part of the issue response table. The consultants largely agreed with the comments made by staff and the Commission. However, some concerns noted by the Commission, such as inclusion of phases 1D and 3, remain as is in the framework plan. And if the Commission tonight decides to retain those pieces, those phases within the framework plan, then staff has included recommendation language to acknowledge their inclusion within the framework plan. So specifically, the updated and revised framework plan has a number of specific goals and objectives, primarily to create a 21st century vision for the Ship Creek area. It analyzes the potential for future development. It updates existing conditions. It acknowledges the consistency with other adopted plans, support for historic preservation, acknowledgement of the seismic and environmental challenges, particularly associated with the seismic hazard zones and the mudflats in Cook Inlet. And it also identifies opportunities for public and private sector investment. At the heart of the framework plan are 3 development phases that include catalytic projects critical to realizing the framework plan vision. Staff have analyzed the framework plan from the perspective of consistency with boundaries, the relationship to other plans, and the implementation. Specifically, when it comes to the boundaries, the point being is that Ship Creek has multiple planning boundaries that intersect and in some cases overlap, and we want to ensure that the boundaries from the various planning documents are workable and achievable. The Ship Creek Framework Plan is part of a mix of plans related to issues such as transportation, land use, recreation, and economic development. So what happens in downtown Anchorage will impact Ship Creek and vice versa. Issues of non-motorized transportation linkages on the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail and the Ship Creek trails will create opportunities for greater connectivity into and out of Ship Creek. And likewise, transportation improvements in Ship Creek, such as the proposed Whitney Road realignment, will also impact the basin. These issues are discussed in more depth within the framework plan. So, a significant point made in both the 1991 plan and the framework plan addressed the concerns about implementation. And we heard a number of comments from the Commission about that issue in November. Essentially, what these documents need and have talked about is gaining a champion and a coordinating entity to move the plan and the vision forward. Additional work is needed to determine the fiscal impacts and sources of funding as each of the phases occur over time. Detailed environmental analysis will be required to consider the phasing, particularly of Phase 3, which anticipates using fill from the mudflats to create a new waterfront on Cook Inlet. And there will also be a need for further policy and zoning changes, among others. In conclusion, Clink Stubbins is essentially in agreement with the majority of staff's recommendations. Your packet tonight includes additional comments from members of the public and a technical recommendation from the Watershed Management Services. We expect that you may have some additional public testimony this evening or not. Staff is recommending approval of the Ship Creek Framework Plan, and after closing the public hearing tonight, the Commission will deliberate and, if ready, make a recommendation to the Assembly. So that concludes my presentation and remarks. I will stand for any questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Spring.
Yes. What's the status of the 1991 plan? Is that an element of the comprehensive plan?
Yes, it is.
It was adopted as a
Yes.
comprehensive plan. Question is, I guess, with your recommendation number 2, the downtown plan and 1991 plan shall be used as the guide for those areas outside of the planned community zoning district. So if we agree to that recommendation, doesn't that more or less negate the majority of this plan?
Through the chair, Commissioner Spring, I don't believe so. I think the response we had from the consultants was that there was additional work that was needed to work through those kind of issues. So I don't think that's the final word on it, if I understand your question correctly.
Well, it says, well, how I interpret that is that if the downtown plan and the 1991 plan are used as a guide, then this plan will not be used as a guide for anything outside the PC district. So we're approving a plan that isn't going to be recognized, basically, except for a small area, which is within the PC district.
Through the chair, Mr. Spring, are you referring to page 22 of the issue, which contains the second page on the issues response table? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to condition number 2 under the recommendation on page 11.
Okay, well, there may be a little confusion there, and if there is, I apologize for that in advance. What staff had prepared for you tonight as a method to organize the responses that we worked through, prepared the issue response table, and so that recommendation, if you look at number 2 on page 22, circles back to clarification of the downtown plan and the 1991 Ship Creek Waterfront Land Use Plan applicability in the planning area. And we note where the consultants have agreed with staff's recommendations and then included the recommendations.
So you're saying this recommendation isn't necessary then?
Well, I'm saying that the most current recommendation that we are making to you, the staff is making to you tonight, is the issue response table.
I guess I am confused then. So all the recommendations under 11 none of those conditions are part of this?
They have been, we have attempted to fold those into the recommendations of this table.
So we're going, if we approve it, we'll approve the table, not the list of 31 conditions.
Well, those 31 conditions are part of the table.
Okay. I don't understand. I'll leave it.
Commissioner Spring, I believe you've got a valid question there. I read the way you're reading, that the department recommendations, we normally routinely adopt these, including the department recommendations such and such on page that. And what I believe the petitioner said, or I'm going to use the word petitioner, said is that his answers, starting on page 21, resolve the issues raised earlier. And I don't know how we resolve that conflict. Any help? Are we valid? Is the concern valid?
What concern? I'm still not sure what we're addressing here. I mean,
Yeah. Mr. Robinson?
Well, what I was hoping we would do, and I probably had the same understanding as Mr. Spring and perhaps you, that we would go, what I was going to ask for is to go through those list of recommendations starting on page 11 and ask which ones still had some difference of opinion, either among the commission or between the municipality staff and the consultant. And I wanted to sort of identify them and work through the key ones that came up. What I'm hearing is that maybe it's not simply those recommendations, but it's the issue response. They're sort of blended together, right? So what is the sheet of music, I think, that you're asking that we ought to be working from?
Ms. Wong is in the queue. Maybe she can help
Thank you.
Commissioners, the staff report lists the 31 conditions that staff had developed for the staff report. The consultants received a copy of the staff report in advance of this meeting and responded to them in those that they were in agreement to versus those that they did not agree to. The table issue response seeks to summarize each of those conditions, 1 through 31, as well as those received from watershed management, as well as some received from residents up at Government Hill, and then we also received one from Rabbit Creek Community Council. So I would say that if you work through the table, that summarizes the 31 recommendations, chiseling it down to language specific of how that issue was addressed, to be addressed in the plan recommended to you all. So that's how I would recommend you work off of the table, because it encapsulates both the 31 staff recommendations and then how they've been responded to by the consulting group, and then additional comments we've received.
Commissioner Spring.
Well, based on that, it looks like there's a difference between the response and to question number 2, item number 2, and what we see in the recommendation section. The general comment number 2 under the issue response says clarify downtown plan and 1991 Ship Creek waterfront land use plan applicability in the planning area. And recommendation, delete, and the recent decision to locate the intermodal transit center, delete second to last sentence that discusses the Midtown Transit Plan, etc. which is not related at all to like the recommendation on number 2. That doesn't relate. There's totally different response than what we see in the recommendation. The recommendation says something entirely different. It doesn't even address intermodal transit center.
I totally agree that the table chooses to restate some of the questions and doesn't answer the question in its total entirety. I mean, and I don't quite know how to resolve that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would recommend following, I've prepared for this particular meeting based on the list of recommendations. So I'm prepared to go, like Commissioner Robinson said, go through each of the recommendations. I mean, we can refer to the table, reach a response, perhaps, if we need clarification, but I think we should go down the list of 30-some recommendations and make motions regarding whether we approve those or not.
Prior to doing that, maybe we should open the public hearing and let the public comment, and then we can do that. Does anyone object to open? Commissioner Robinson?
I don't object. I just had one clarifying question. In the table, there's an agree in the left-hand column and agree in the right-hand column. Right? And I think the agree in the left-hand column is primarily what the consultant, it jives with the consultant's response, right?
That's correct.
And the agree in the right-hand column, is that because those have to do with issues other than coming from the consultant? They come from the public or from others?
Correct.
And so the consultant is silent on those, or they just weren't privy to them because they came in recently, or?
Well, it's not that, through the chair, Commissioner Robinson, not that they weren't privy to them, but it was, you didn't want to reduplicate the agreement when they've already agreed to that item, if that makes sense.
I think it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Walker?
So this is just a clarification on the same question, but basically the consultant under the right-hand column, staff recommendations and response, the consultant has agreed by and large to those stipulations. I mean, those things that you guys have outlined there.
Through the chair, Commissioner Walker, on the left-hand column is where the agreement is from Kling-Stubbins.
Okay. So, and then have they had a chance to review your response in the right-hand column?
I believe so, yes. I believe they were provided with copies of the issue response table. So, and they've had an opportunity to look at it.
Okay. Now, where it says so, I mean, some places there's a staff response and a recommendation. Others there's only a recommendation. And then, I mean, some places it seems clearer than others whether how the staff and the consultants agree and or disagree. I guess we're trying to identify problem areas so that we don't have to go through every one of these.
Yeah. Through the chair, Commissioner Walker. So, for example, on item number 30, the consultants agreed with the prior March 10th comments. And so on the right-hand column, we provided a staff response and then a recommendation where it was appropriate.
My question, so, Mr. Chairman, I mean, is it necessary for us to go through every one of these points if these have already been vetted?
What I'm going to do for the public, I'm going to find out if there's any public wishing to speak.
Okay.
If they are, I'm going to give them the opportunity, and then we'll come back, address the wish of the body. So, petition, stand by for a minute if you would, please. Okay. By a show of the hands out there, are there any public that wish to testify? Seeing that there is no one here who wishes to testify, the public hearing is open and the public hearing is closed. Now, there was one gentleman back there and he shook his head no at me for everybody that wants to know what happened. So we have no public testimony to take.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think you should probably give the mayor the opportunity to speak here, whether it's in or out of the public hearing. We can certainly work through these issues with respect to the conditions in the table, but maybe to hear from the consultant and the mayor.
Good point. Your Honor, would you care to speak?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I hadn't really planned to speak. I just wanted to hear the revised presentation by the consultants, and hadn't had a chance to meet with them prior to the meeting today. So, like yourselves, I was anxious to hear how they responded to your comments. So there were some very good comments made by the Commission, and I think the back and forth has been very healthy for what is now the framework plan. This has been a project that's been on my mind really since I served on the Assembly, and you saw the timeline back in 2000 through 2009 where there was many elements of the Ship Creek area being developed in planning form, whether it was the bicycle pedestrian plan, whether there was just a whole number of work products during that period. So when I was able to become mayor, it was, again, something high on my list where there's just such great potential there. And I think it's probably summed up best by what the consultants identified in a phrase that says, we're a city on the water with no waterfront. And most of us have traveled extensively around the country, and I think I can't imagine another city on the Pacific Ocean with as underdeveloped a waterfront as we have here in Anchorage, Alaska. And as we're progressing to becoming one of the truly great cities in America, you probably have heard this, but Kiplinger.com just named us the 9th best city in the country. We have to look at opportunities like this. AEDC is, their goal is #1 in America by 2025, and it's elements like this that really help make a city a great city. You look at what's going on in the Arctic world in Helsinki and Stockholm, they're all redeveloping their waterfronts and being recognized as truly great international cities because of the commitment they're making to truly being cities on the water with a waterfront. So no plan is perfect. I've heard comments that, well, who's going to pay for all this, that sort of thing. Plans aren't financial plans. They're vision plans. And where appropriate, certainly, the city will, over the course of the next generation, invest in infrastructure just like we do in any part of the community. This will be really a partnership between public and private sector, just like we've seen in many, many instances, not only in Anchorage, but in other places where plans like this have become successful. But the first step is to make a commitment to it, and without a plan, nothing progresses. And there's no perfect plan. And so we have to keep in mind that this really is a starting point, but it's a good starting point. And it does reflect a vision that as I've presented this around the community, I probably have spoken, giving kind of my State of this City address to 40 different groups. And at every single speech, this is an element of what I've presented. And the enthusiasm is palpable. It's people want something to happen down there. It all starts with a plan. So thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? No.
Any questions? Thank you, Mayor Sullivan. What's the wish of the body? Commissioner Walker.
Well, I have a question for the staff, and also, I think a clarification. Mr. Chairman, you and I were the only two here tonight that were actually at the work session for this. And as I recall, one key theme during that work session was that this really is this is a general direction. We're not necessarily hammering down all the details, and there seems to be a lot of flexibility left in this plan to change and a certain degree of fluidity, and that we're not necessarily reviewing the details here tonight. So.
No, I believe you're correct, and I believe that's how come it came back as a framework plan.
And I framed that as a statement, but if the staff could comment on that, to what degree this is flexible, I think that might help us all to understand exactly what we're supposed to be doing here tonight.
So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Walker, that's a question that's been on staff's mind as well, is trying to maintain the flexibility of this planning document so that it can be a useful tool to guide the vision forward. And admittedly, the vision aspect of this is 50 to 100 years, so it's a long way out, which is much broader than the typical comp plan, which is 20 years, and those are usually redone in a 10-year time frame. So the flexibility piece is a key component, and we have endeavored through our comments and discussions with the consultants to ensure that there is the flexibility there to make things happen without being too prescriptive. And so notwithstanding the fact that there are details contained within the plan that are either linked to other planning documents or that are part of this planning document, that will have specific impacts on a variety of different issues within the Ship Creek Basin.
Okay, we've got a couple up here on the queue, and then we'll go to you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Spring?
Actually, my question is for Mr. Adams. Should I wait?
Go.
Okay. One of the questions that came up.
Excuse me, just for the record, my name is Dwayne Adams. I'm with USKH, and I'm with Michael Stevenson. Michael Stevenson with Kling Stubbins, and he's a prime and would like to make a short presentation, but I thought I might deal with this or whatever other issue you might have. Thank you.
One of the issues that that came up in the staff report was the intermodal transit facility, and I guess I was confused about what the conflict is there. I thought that the intermodal transit center, as envisioned by the railroad, was on the east side of the existing depot, but it seems like, according to the staff report, it's on the west side, and that the consultants think it'd be better to be on the east side. I'm not sure which is which.
Through the chair, Commissioner Spring, the intermodal, the original plan was to locate as an extension from E Street, a connection to the west side of the existing depot. This plan recommends two connections, pedestrian connections, one that provides a connection about a block to the west of that, and then of that original plan, and then another pedestrian access that would be basically on the east side of the depot. So that's what's in this plan, are two different connections, each of them serving a different purpose, but fundamentally the second one, which is east, what we're proposing to be east of the depot, provides an intermodal connection to get people out of the trains, and that's, as you well know, a viable possibility, into the downtown core and
So
into other
conflict regarding the location of the
east,
new intermodal facility?
Whether it's east or west is the question, and staff's, if you were to review staff's comments, they have a proposal that simply requires additional study, which we agree. I don't want to take away from Mr. Stevenson's presentation, but the fundamental one, and the reason that we're asking to look at an eastern location, is that the western location solves a very site-specific problem, and that's a good thing. That direct connection when E Street was envisioned as a much grander promenade, perhaps, than it probably could be. What this looks at is that these two connections that we're talking about are very important for different reasons, and that's the relationship of the whole Ship Creek Valley to downtown. And that's why Kling Stubbins is suggesting that that might have a better result overall. So that's where that comes from, but that's that issue. So hopefully that helps. And if you want me to get into the flexibility and the framework issue, I can deal with that, but I would suggest also that Mr. Stevenson speak.
I think what I'm going to say is we're going to let Stacy, let Ms. Dean ask her question, and then we'll let Mr. Stevens go, and then we're going to figure out what direction we're going to do. We're going to get something settled here because we seem to be wandering. But Mr. Stebbins, if you would like to come up and address us, that'd be fine.
At this point, or Ms. Dean?
Who's your question to? Okay, well, let's let Mr. Stebbins go, and then we'll go to Ms. Dean.
Okay. Mr. Stubbins.
Good evening. My name is Michael Stevenson, Stevenson.
I apologize.
No problem. The firm is Kling Stubbins. The mayor and Mr. Cecil did a great job of covering the basics, so I'm not going to reiterate those things. This is a framework plan. It purposes to augment and not replace the 1991 plan. It is to provide updates and further clarifications as to how development can occur in the Ship Creek Valley and the waterfront. It's very important that to realize that some of the goals that were stated in the 1991 plan still hold very true today, and we believe the current framework plan advances those. I'll just state three of them: to revitalize portions of the Ship Creek waterfront area and support its growth into a viable tourist-related, people-oriented commercial development. Number two, to respond to the needs of local residents and tourists for public access to the water, night as well as daytime activities, year-round activities, to maximize use and enjoyment of the creek and waterfront for all. And three, to integrate the waterfront and Ship Creek into the fabric of the municipality. I believe those are just as important today as they were 23 years ago. We have looked carefully at all the current plans that have been cited. We believe we're very consistent with those. The 2007 downtown plan to identify catalytic and opportunity sites, encourage housing development, maintain and enhance parks and open space, improve the pedestrian and bicycle environment, and enhance the image of the municipality. The 2012 Government Hill Neighborhood Plan, creating more pedestrian, mixed-use environment with improved access to downtown and Ship Creek while maintaining the views from the neighborhood. The 2000 Ship Creek Multimodal Transportation Plan, we have incorporated the three major recommendations in that of realigning the Whitney Road, providing a road connection out to the waterfront, and a direct access from the Port of Anchorage to the Ingra-Gamble couplet. In terms of phasing, it's a very important part of this plan, and we've gotten a number of comments regarding phasing from staff. And we do realize this plan is visionary and very long-term. At the same time, there are specific elements which we believe can happen in a relatively short time and have very positive outcomes in the near term. These will build on the existing strengths of Ship Creek and lay the groundwork for the future development. That is really the key of phase one, which we have shown here on this board to my left. The important elements are the principle of phase one is to balance public investment on infrastructure, which is necessary, with income-producing private development that will create momentum for continued development. The key components build upon the existing recreational uses, which is very important to the life of the city, connecting Tony Knowles Coastal Trail and the Ship Creek Trail, creating a new casting and skating pond, realigning Whitney Road to create a more park-like environment for Ship Creek, and improving public access to the Cook Inlet waterfront. Connection to downtown, we are proposing a direct pedestrian and bike connection from downtown at the shortest possible point, which is at the termination of F Street, and also creating a sculpture park on the buttress, creating handicap accessible path down from Third Avenue down to First Avenue. And we think what's really important to get this development happening is to create a critical mass in the first phase. That's why we've designated phase 1 where we're showing it. That is the largest parcel under the control of the railroad where we can have a sufficient footprint to create a real urban destination with a mix of uses. That's why phase 1 is shown where it is. I would reiterate to your question about why we're recommending locating the intermodal center to the east. The reason for that is if it were to remain on the west, as it was shown in the previous study, that would occupy a large portion of that site, bringing with it all the uncertainties that come with the timing of when the funding, much of that federal funding, would come into play. We think that could potentially be a hindrance to attracting investment. If we move it to the east, which has other advantages, we keep that large parcel for private development, and where we can create that mixed-use environment. At the same time, we agree that with staff that there needs to be flexibility in the phasing. There are certainly elements of phase 2 that could be advanced and happen concurrently with phase 1. We'd be delighted if that were to happen. But at the same time, we place the emphasis on phase 1 where we can create that critical mass. And we also recognize that this is a long-term vision. It will take several generations, particularly considering phase 3, require much investment, much more detailed study for that to be realized. At the same time, we realize Anchorage has fixed boundaries. Future development is going to have to move towards higher density forms and reinforce the city's center. But we still believe that this city deserves a bold vision to guide development for the next century, and we think that's what this plan does, and we hope that you agree with many of the points we've made. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Dean?
Through the chair, I had some questions regarding impact on the neighborhoods on this project. And I was looking at the Bootleggers Cove area. If I remember right, some of their changes to Bootleggers Cove are going to be pretty serious in order to put in the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail Extension and the Tidal Sculpture Park and the Resolution Park, and then the road that's going to bring 4th Avenue down, and then a bridge over the railroad and into that new filled area, that 70 acres of additional property. What specifically was going to be affected again on Bootleggers Cove? I guess I'm having a little trouble looking at the book because it doesn't really give me an overlay of what's existing and what you're proposing changing.
Okay. I think maybe a simple answer is that all of the landfill portion that has been proposed for phase 3 happens north of Elderberry Park. So my understanding of the Bootleggers Cove neighborhood is mostly south of Elderberry Park, most of it. It is absolutely true that the 4th Avenue extension flyover, it has to go over the track. It would skirt along the northern edge of Elderberry Park and affect some of the properties. I believe there's an apartment building and the historic Anderson House as well, and that would have to have a study as to that impact and how it might have to be relocated. We don't have a precise alignment on that yet, but it does appear that could be a conflict. But in terms of the neighborhood further south, we don't see a significant impact to the Bootleggers Cove residential area.
Other than those buildings you listed, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just out of curiosity, do you have an idea yet of how long it would take to get all of the permits necessary to fill that 70 acres before you could actually begin construction? I mean, the environmental impact statements have gotten ridiculous. I'm just curious if you're looking at it thinking it's going to be a 10-year kind of a thing, or, you know, what's the start?
I would think permitting, going through the entire process, could be something in the area of 10 years.
So things could change through that process too, which makes it even harder. Yeah.
But that Phase 3 particularly is something that would be of long duration in the planning and implementation, there's no question, and permitting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
What's the wish of the body? Do we work through the recommendations? What do we want to do? I'm getting 8 stares at the deer in the headlight.
We're agreeable to what he
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
That's the way I prepared for the meeting. I prepared by going through the list of recommendations.
Which list of recommendations?
The recommendations that are start on page 11.
Yeah, that's my concern. That's how I prepared, was reading those 11
as everything outside of our boundary.
Starting on 11. But I don't believe that gives us a complete answer at all.
Did we clarify that?
We're okay if we just deal with 22.
But I'm open.
Yeah, I know, but they don't.
I'm open to help.
I have a question.
Okay.
But I guess
And then Tyler.
through the chair for the commissioners, let's say we move through this list, and are we prepared to approve this with a blank check to the staff to resolve these 30-some issues? I mean, that seems like the overriding question.
I think that's a correct question, but I think we'd know more after we work through them on
Okay.
that. Mr. Robinson?
You know, I think that it mostly tracks with the table, with the exception of some additions to the table which are beyond these initial issues. So what I think would be appropriate is if we perhaps go commissioner by commissioner and talk about which ones you would like to discuss further, and we stick to those, and we can either handle those in the committee of the whole, come out and make specific recommendations when we pass an affirmative motion, presumably to adopt the plan.
Good idea. I appreciate that. Is that agreeable to the other commissioners? Commissioner Barker? Which, and I am working on the recommendations starting on page 11. I mean, let's go through and find out how many we have first, and then we can go back to that. So all I want right now is by number of which ones have you concern, or all of them, I guess.
I think Commissioner Spring has a prepared list. Is probably more prepared to answer that.
I can see bouncing back in here. You get one of those. Okay, Commissioner Spring, which items are your concern?
Yeah, I guess if you want to call it, we're pulling the items.
Okay, that'd be a good way.
1, 2, 3. Excuse me. 22, 26. And 31. I don't necessarily disagree with them, but I'd like some explanation maybe and discussion.
Commissioner Yoshimura, do you have any you'd care to identify right now? Thank you. Commissioner Dean?
I'd add 30.
30? You have any other, Commissioner Dean?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Okay. Commissioner Brandon? Commissioner Walker?
I have none.
None. Commissioner Robinson?
None.
Commissioner Barker?
None.
I don't know if this is going to work then, but I've got questions on question 7 then. Okay, so we have a handful of these. let's try to address those and see where we end up. Commissioner Spring, you went first. You started with item 1. I would assume that we're going to work item 1 with the table item 1. Is that correct? Hey, what's your question with item 1?
Recommendation 1?
Yeah.
Recommendation that consultants explain why there are areas of overlap between the downtown plan and the framework plan, and how they would be addressed in the framework plan, particularly as they relate to developments contemplated for phase 3 of jurisdictional zoning and ownership standard. I don't necessarily disagree. I mean, there is some conflict between the downtown plan and the framework plan, but I think the way to address it is to, assuming that we approve phase 3, is to make amendments to the downtown plan as development occurs. My opinion is that the framework plan should guide development within the boundaries of the study area. And if you're successful, I don't think you should be second-guessing the framework plan. You should be going ahead and implementing it. And once you have something solid to implement, if it's a conflict with the downtown plan, then the downtown plan should be amended. That's how it should be resolved.
Through the chair, Commissioner Spring, yeah, one thing to recognize, of course, is that the first plan in place was the Ship Creek plan in 1991. So there's a tremendous amount of conflict in some ways between the downtown plan. The downtown plan simply didn't recognize it even existed. So we begin from that point, I guess, which convolutes everything. So just to recognize what a framework plan is if we look at the comp plan and the elements of the comp plan, specifically the district plan, what the district plans do are fundamentally goals, objectives, and strategies to achieve certain results. And so if we go to what currently exists as the next step, that would be the zoning district, in this case the PC district, which is only a small portion, about a third of the overall waterfront land use plan, Ship Creek and waterfront land use plan. So missing from that is something that puts a lot of meat on the bone. I mean, if you envision a stew, there's one thing to know that we're going to feed this many people, we need this many portions, we need to make sure we have carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and all these. And then when we go to the other end of that, there is exactly what the number of ingredients, but missing is what's going to make it the stew, that it's a lamb stew, that there's certain vegetables and that kind of thing. And so when we look at what we're trying to create here, and recognizing that moving to that district plan requires such an extensive public process and input that we weren't there. The commission told us that last time. Staff told us the same thing. But what we did need was something that provides that vision. And what we did was we looked around the world. Most of the framework planning actually is done in Great Britain. That's where the concept of a framework plan came. In the U.S., Portland is a city that really is using framework plans. And what they've done and what the framework plan does fundamentally is it really provides a grand unifying vision and then different ways of achieving that vision. And that's what we're trying to do. So we aren't trying to be so prescriptive as to this land use is going to be that, but what we are trying to do is say what kind of pieces are in the stew that we're creating. What's going to make this a place that entices investment? And the proof is that there's a lot of interest now within the development community, certain portions of the community, that the railroad's being approached by people, and there are people in this community who are now looking at opportunities that this presents because they're envisioning this as something that it was not before. And so even though we have the PC district in place, and even though we have a downtown plan and a land use plan that doesn't provide the vision that people need to know that's going to guide this. So that's what we're trying to get to. So with respect to this overlapping, that overlap exists. And regardless of which of the plans we're talking about, this does not displace the need for those plans, nor does it do anything other than supplement those and make them better plans. If you look at the downtown plan, it has one connection to the Ship Creek area, and that's it. So this plan says, you know, there's some great opportunities to achieve that beyond what's in that plan. Now, you know, there's a lot of things to be resolved. That Phase 3 is a long ways out there. Commissioner Dean's point is right on target, that we got to do a lot of permitting, we got to do a lot of investigation. With respect to, for example, the seismic issue, we know we need to do that. But one thing that's kind of curious is if you look at the seismic maps and you look at the old fill that was placed on the north side of Ship Creek, it moves suddenly, once it gets away from the bluff, from a high seismic risk to a moderate seismic risk. And so there is some possibilities that demands some investigation to see what are the dynamics that are making this happen. Is the Falls port, when it's developed, will it remain as a moderate or will it be a high seismic risk? So there's a lot that's unknown. We don't purport to have addressed those issues here. They require a lot of investigation, but what we are trying to do is provide a vision so that regardless of which district plan it is, it still has content and is still applicable to those individual plans. You know, the downtown plan also overlaps the Government Hill plan also. So that exists in a lot of planning. But are all the goals and all the intents mutually objectionable? No, they actually work together quite well.
Well, there's a distinction between overlap and conflict. Sometimes this framework plan recommends something that is different from the comprehensive plans like the downtown and the 1991. With this question, if we agree to this recommendation, what is your answer? Are you saying that this recommendation isn't needed, and that there is no overlap ultimately because of they're both share the same mission or the same objectives?
Through the Chair, Commissioner Spring, what I suggest is that what you suggested right off the bat may be the way to resolve that. Simply state where conflict exists at the point a proposal becomes evident that it be resolved between the two plans, which is appropriate.
Okay. So why don't we, my suggestion would be to put that as a statement in this recommendation rather than make it ambiguous and not knowing.
And I think that resolves 1 and 2. I think that resolves 1 and 2, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, but that elevates this framework plan to the same level of the other plan, and that bothers me. I mean, we in this community, we've done a poor job of coming up with an order of precedence in our documents. In our private people that work in development need to know which document is superior to which document. And
which is,
I thought we had an answer when this went to a framework plan, that it stepped back 1 step. But the solution you two just discussed elevates this back up to the same level, and in case of a conflict, you know, we don't have a resolution. All we're saying, oh, there's a problem, you know, how do we resolve it? And you want me as a private investor to go invest millions of dollars on something that I don't know, I don't have the certainty that I want.
Through the Chair, though, what I do suggest, though, that then it demands that the test be done, and that is, does it pass it? And that's what the Commission sits for in the Assembly also. So there is the ability at the point that it differs, then it has to pass that test. And a lot of what we're talking about is public infrastructure investment. This isn't private. The conflict is in the public investment, not necessarily in the private.
But the public will be investing only when they know the private will be there to follow. I mean, it's got to go hand in hand. And we're going to try this a little bit. I'm trying to see if I can come up with a mechanism.
Mr. Chairman, could I just make one comment? Yes. What staff has tried to do in the chart, in the recommendation, and you can see that they've said that basically those adopted plans would need to be amended where there are inconsistencies. So you have the provision right in there that you've been discussing that you really, you know, if you need to amend the language that's here, I'd suggest you do that. But the way it's worded here, the hierarchy is recognized, the framework plan is recognized, and where there are amendments required to existing plans, they would be required.
Which one are you reading there from?
On one.
On one.
Recommendation.
Mr. Chair?
That's right what that says.
I agree with you that there needs to be some direction that a developer has to know, you know, is it the framework plan that I should be following, or is it the comprehensive plan should I be following? And I would suggest that in number 2 that we clarify that, and that we say that the framework plan should be used as a guide for the area within the boundaries of the framework plan. And then that fits in with, then the developer knows, well, they said that this is where we're going in this area as far as development is concerned. But the second step is to go back and amend the comprehensive plan. That's the second step. I don't see that as being something onerous to the developer. I think they should be assured, especially if we include in this language here that it's the guide, the framework plan is the guide, then they should be assured that in all likelihood the comp plan is going to be amended, because this is where this is our vision. And it's just a matter of amending then the comp plan and to reconcile it. And we can't do that now because, as you say, we need some flexibility and there'll be some changes to the development plans. There might be some movement. And so we set everything in stone now. We just have to amend it anyway, probably.
Okay. Commissioner Walker?
So I have a question for both of you gentlemen. You used Portland as an analogy for this process. Obviously, we're overlapping an older process of the comprehensive plan with this new framework plan. So in a perfect world, if we were going to copy Portland, we would merely have a series of overlapping framework plans. Is that a fair statement? Or are they using both of these kinds of plans that overlap in those? Because clearly it's working for them.
My understanding is they have a somewhat different purpose. So the framework plan, as Dwayne was explaining, describe a larger vision and an end goal, and then within that are district plans and plan developments, what have you, that then get tailored to reach the end game. I just wanted to clarify regarding item 2, Commissioner Spring, when we read that, we understood that to mean that areas outside of our study boundary, the framework plan boundary, because that boundary would be zone PC. So we understood that to mean outside of the framework plan boundary.
That's what I would hope it would be, but
Yes.
the PC district is actually within the
current one.
boundary.
Yes, you're right.
The way it's worded, I would.
No, I agree. I just wanted to clarify what our understanding was.
Commissioner Spring, you had comments on 3 also?
Second paragraph of the 2007 downtown plan should address how the framework plan relates to the relevant policies and strategies of the downtown plan. We recommend a general statement stating that where elements of the development phases diverge from the downtown plan, such as potential for downtown street network changes, the framework plan supports follow-up studies, public process, and potential comprehensive plan amendments to reconcile these inconsistencies prior to phasing implementation. Well, that's in line, I think, with what my recommendations were, to make amendments to the comprehensive plans as developments occur. I don't know if I would require every development to do a traffic impact study, which follow-up studies I mean, in some cases, it wouldn't require follow-up studies, I don't think. It'd just be a matter of submitting the amendment to the comprehensive plan. So as long as that is interpreted to mean flexibility and not putting such a burden on any development that conflicts with the downtown plan or the 1991 plan, I'd be okay with it. But if everybody has to go through some really rigorous process, no matter what the size or the change in the comp plan, I think that would be a detriment to development in Ship Creek.
If I may, at the end of the document, in some of the later stages of staff comments, they asked for some additional language to address this very thing, and I think that's appropriate so that there's a little more guidance to developers as well as anyone who uses this document as to how to go about doing that, and we aren't opposed to that.
Commissioner Robinson?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with the language. I mean, I think I think what I'm hearing us saying as we head down this road of having a framework plan and comprehensive plans is that we really can't be inconsistent with our comprehensive plan. However, we can stray from a framework plan that gives, as I heard the petitioner say, what development can look like. He didn't say what development will look like. He said this is an example, this is an illustrative example of what it could be. The biggest burden, frankly, is going to be on the railroad, and I kind of wish the railroad was here to say, to what degrees are you handcuffing yourselves to a plan, that you have theoretically been a partner to. That's really the railroad as well as who they decide to have develop their properties or lease properties to or whomever. But short of them not being there, I think I'm okay with taking a leap of faith on this vision here and seeing how things unfold, hopefully with a first project or two that are identified in phase one.
I think that was the limit of the ones you had pulled, Commissioner Spring, is that correct?
No, I had several more, 3 more, but that's okay. We go in order. Somebody suggested 7 was...
Okay, we'll go to 7. It's no secret I'm concerned with 7. I'm concerned in a couple of ways. We have development down there, and I understand that. Our development down there is a port facility and a small boat launching facility. In case of a seismic event with a tsunami, most of those people, and I'm talking about a small number of people, can self-evacuate. Your plan in phase 3 in particular shows 70 acres of highly dense offices, hotels, condos down there. Particularly with hotels, if we have a tsunami and the horns go off, we may not have a mechanism to evacuate those people. People at the port came to work in a car. People at the small boat harbor came to work or came there in a car, and they can self-evacuate. But if we've got 300 conventioneers in a hotel that showed up on a bus and the horn goes off, we have to go climb. We're asking them to go climb a hill, and I have a concern with that. At the same time, I understand the need for a vision. I've crossed over to the dark side, and I understand the need for a vision, and I can do that. But I am just concerned, in particularly if you look at Oso, Washington, or you look at the TV specials that ran last week on the 50th anniversary, there is a chance for things to happen. And right now, we don't have people in that place. Whether by chance or by luck, they're not there. And we're going to go, if you wanted to put a coastal trail extension across those mud flats and a parking area for that, man, I'd be all on board with that. That'd be fine. I understand what you say when you say we're a waterfront without a waterfront. I mean, you've taught me that, and I understand that. But I'm really concerned with that in Phase 3, and I'm not alone. A lot of the comments we received are along on those sides. And I don't believe, when I read the answers, frankly, I'm a little bit upset. Text should be corrected to reflect the extent of seismic hazard zone 4 in the study area. We agree, and then you diverse into an argument over what's high or very high ground failure analysis. You ignore the tsunamis. You just sort of kind of get wrapped up in the discussion. And that's, I mean, stage 1, stage 2, I'm on board with. I think they're a good plan. But stage 3, where we start putting people on the mudflats, exposing them to ground failure, exposing them to tsunamis, I think the vision's gone too far there. And I don't know how we resolve it. I really don't.
Chair Ferguson, in the back is language that addresses the type studies that are required in the process to do that. So with respect to how, it's in the document in the latter stage that talks about that. And within the text, it recognizes that seismic hazard. It's contained within that text. And it specifically says in this area that a number of things have to be satisfied, and the things you're concerned with are part of that criteria. It doesn't say that it's going to happen. It's got to pass those tests again.
Thank you. Okay, someone had a question on 22.
I believe that was my question.
Okay.
Let's see. Phase 1D of the framework plan proposes to expand the earlier concept by the development of a freshwater marsh. We previously recommended this phase be deleted from the framework plan. However, this phase remains within the framework plan. Staff recommends that further analysis and study of this concept will be necessary to determine its desirability and its ability to secure the required permissions for its implementation. Yeah, well, I guess I brought this one up because I think in the previous discussion, we recommended it be deleted altogether. And I think I've changed my mind somewhat on that issue. I don't have an objection to the limited development on the mudflats. In this case, it's not, there's not the big mixed-use development or housing. It's simply a freshwater marsh, and there's a cruise ship dock there. And it seems to me that maybe a cruise ship dock might be a good location for it. I know the location we have now is bad. It shares the dock space with the port. I don't know if that's the reason why we don't get cruise ships, or it's because it's a long way around the peninsula to get here. But it would be nice to have a cruise ship dock that's separate from the port, and maybe it will potentially draw more. And that might be one of the keys to the development of Ship Creek, to get more tourists in. Those ships are so huge, you get a dozen of them in, you might have some real development down there. It'll be, jewelry or something, but at least that's something, you can have. I don't see any jewelry shops. You should have a row of jewelry shops along Ship Creek Avenue there, but maybe you could amend the plan to do that. Yeah, Juneau and Ketchikan, right. That's what we want for Ship Creek. But I guess I don't. I brought that up because I thought that was a discussion that we needed to have, and that we had kind of nixed it last time around. Do we want to keep it in this time? My question.
I had a question. Staff's explanation in the table is sort of that it just needs to be further studied or whatever. Is your recommendation that somehow that disclaimer be added to the narrative? Is that what you're really saying there?
Through the chair, yes, Commissioner.
So somewhere where it has the one pager on Phase 1D, you would just add that disclaimer in there?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
One of the commissioners had objection to 30.
I didn't really have an objection. It was just more of a discussion of how it's going to affect the neighborhoods. One of the things that, I found from working in Bootleggers Cove is there's a tremendous amount of water that comes out of that hillside. Water, huge amounts of water. Who did the 4th and M, 5th and M building? The condos. Yeah, he has massive water problems with that building. I don't know how many pumps he had going all the time, and I think he still does. If you're going to go ahead and fill the wetlands, how are you guys going to deal with that water coming out of the hillside? It's just one of those things. I mean, there's a lot of issues with that whole area. I'm just really concerned about butting it up to Bootleggers Cove, and the transition there is really tough. There's, I mean, that was the loaf area that peeled off the hillside during the earthquake.
Commissioner Dean, your comments are on point. There's a lot of study that needs to be done before that makes sense. Like most of this area, the Phase 3, I assume, is what you're talking about, and that's a long ways into the future. 10 years is a minimum. I think 30 in this town, 50. I mean, we know when was the last time we saw a sky crane in this town? We're a 3% growth city. We're not a boom and bust city, and that's all a long ways ahead. And the contribution from Springs or Seeps is all part of it. The port has to deal with that same thing coming down from Cherry Hill, which is in Government Hill. I mean, it's all part and parcel of the studies, because that feed of groundwater, it can exacerbate seismic activity and landslide potential too. So is that an issue or not? It's such a big issue. We certainly can't deal with it at this level, but it is something that needs to be in here and has to be one of the proofs that this, any development has to meet. So your comments well intended and well received.
We've got one more item that had been identified, and then we're going to have to decide what we're going to do with this thing. Item 31, I don't know who had a question with that.
I had a question on that, Chair. I don't really have a problem with that particular recommendation, but I do want to add one of the key actions, I think, that are needed for particularly Phase 2. Is it 2A or 2D? The marsh and the is that 2D? The saltwater marsh and the cruise ship dock is 2D?
No, it's 1D. It's 1D.
That's 1D? Okay. Well, it says need to identify key actions. Well, one of the key actions, I think, is the extension of Ship Creek Avenue to that area. I mean, that's the key, obviously. That's what's going to make it work. Otherwise, the railroad's not going to let you go across at grade. So you got to go over. And I have some real questions about that. I think it needs to be identified as one of the critical path studies that need to be done for that phase. Particularly since you remember the Ship Creek Trail and how it goes over the railroad and how high that goes over the railroad. And it's like 22 feet, I think, is the minimum you need for clearance, or more.
25.
I don't know, I forget exactly.
We've heard 25.
25 feet, which is pretty high. And if you have a grade of 6%, well, that's 400 feet on both sides. Bigger than a football field. You have to go up 400 feet and then go down 400 feet. And I guess my question, is that feasible, and what does that do to the rest of the development there? You want to have the market there, you want to have the hotel, and do you want to have a flyover that goes right over those structures? And how much is it going to cost? Because it's going to be really expensive. So I think that's all. That's just identify that as one of the critical paths.
That was a key planning consideration, as you pointed out, the height clearance and the 6% maximum gradient, and the plan does reflect those realities in terms of the approaches to make that. But it does also require.
I couldn't tell that.
I know the scale is hard to.
But it's just something that needs a study that needs to be done
Yes.
to before that progresses. I think.
Commissioner Yoshimura.
You know, I'm not a planner, so I don't speak planner language, but I do have a couple of comments that I would like to make. Obviously, the railroad is very key to this development. Can you give me a little idea of how much time you spent with the railroad, you know, with this plan? I know Jim Kubitz is on the front of the plan as being a participant, but I mean, really, did they just give you a lot of lip service, or did you spend hours with them, or how did all that occur?
I would say hours is a fair assessment. In our in the meetings that occurred in the early part of 2013, I think we were here 4 times, having stakeholder meetings, public, you know, the different public meetings and so forth. And every one of those occasions, we were with Jim and other people, and we also had a more formal meeting at their headquarters where I think there were probably 8 or 10 railroad representatives. We went through this in a fair amount of detail. During the course of all that, they issued 2 letters to us outlining concerns they had and so forth, which we subsequently addressed with further discussions. So I would say it was substantial.
Do we have those letters
Do you?
in our packet?
I don't know that they're in the packet
They
or
were
not.
in the prior.
In the prior packet.
In the prior packet.
Right.
I believe-
We had letters from the railroad, and I think they may have testified.
Jim testified.
Yeah, he testified.
Yes, in November.
In favor of the project.
That's right. And then I would say I share Chair Ferguson's concern about the seismic activities. You know, you talk about Portland and Helsinki and Stockholm, but, you know, they never had a major earthquake. And, you know, I think to use those as examples is just a little problematic, given our situation. And then the other comment that I wanted to make in general was, I don't believe it's the developer's responsibility to amend the comp plan. I think that's if the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Planning Board does something and it requires a change to the comp plan, that's the responsibility of staff, I believe, to bring that forward, and not the developer. Those are my comments.
Any other questions? Okay. It's that time of the evening. What is the wish of the body? The luck of the draw. Commissioner Robinson.
Thank you. In the matter of case number 2014-033, Ship Creek Framework Plan, I move that we adopt the plan and recommend approval by the Assembly along with staff recommendations on pages 11 through 17 and the items detailed in the issue response table, as well as the amendments as presented in the plan with us this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, you seconded that. Any comments?
Yes, I think it makes sense to follow the staff's comments, and I guess I would like to see those comments made a part of this plan if we're going to proceed. And on some level, we're, I think, going to take a leap of faith here that those are going to get memorialized in appropriately. And I sense that maybe somebody might bring up an amendment about Phase 3 and or Phase 1D, the pond. And in my mind, I find, Phase 3 is a very, very long-term vision, and I don't see any reason to attempt to remove that from the plan at this point. And Phase 1D seems like an appropriate part of this vision. I mean, if we strip those things away, there really isn't much left at that point. So I'm inclined to support moving forward as is.
Commissioner Spring, your finger was an instant late, so I'm gonna, do you have any comments?
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion.
Mr. Spring, may we?
Okay. I think recommendation number 2 needs to be clarified to read, the framework plan shall be used as the guide for development within its planning boundaries, with the understanding that conflicts between the framework plan and the adopted comprehensive plan will be reconciled through amendments to the comprehensive plans.
Okay. You make that in the form of a motion?
I think it was a motion.
Well, if
You're going to ask me to repeat it now.
No, I'm going to ask you to push your computer screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
I had a question, actually.
Sorry.
Okay.
This is probably a question for the staff. Are we setting a precedent that basically any framework plan from here on out would more or less trump, for lack of a better term, the comprehensive plan if there was an overlap between the two? I just want to make sure we're not making a critical problem for somebody else down the road here.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Walker, the framework plan is not going to trump any of the adopted comprehensive plan, the downtown plan, or any of the elements that it's a guidance document that will necessitate probably changes to those other plans, but it would not trump.
Okay, we need a second on Commissioner Spring's motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Spring, I believe your motion failed for the lack of a second. So we are back now to Commissioner Robinson's motion on it. Any further discussion on that before we vote? Mr. Walker, are you still up, or are you in the queue?
No, that was my last
Okay.
question.
Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, I wanted to defer to Mr. Spring. I think you had an amendment on one of the latter issues that you wanted to introduce as we went through them, and I was sort of expecting you to bring that forward.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair. 31 was just a comment, I think, regarding what needs to be included as part of the key actions. And I think the consultants addressed that. It's their intent to do further studies on Ship Creek Avenue extension. So I'm satisfied with the answer.
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Robinson, would you attempt to
yeah, I would just like to speak to the motion, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Okay.
Unless
do.
you have an amendment yourself.
No.
You know, I first of all, I'd like to indicate that I believe staff and the consultants did a fine job taking, our feedback. I think, as is still evident here tonight, we're wrestling with, a different layer of a plan that is to be adopted here, and exactly how it fits. We've been our own sort of worst enemies, perhaps, with the way we've drawn boundaries in past plans and then sort of exacerbated it. But I think, I believe what I've heard here tonight is that this framework plan provides a big vision on how Anchorage can become a city by the waterfront, how we can expand our recreational opportunities in Ship Creek, how we can expand commercial and residential opportunities in Ship Creek, and ultimately attract a visitor industry to continue to grow as a city. And I might add that it also tries to do so by looking across all 4 of our seasons, or at least all 2 of them. I think that what I hear in a framework plan is that there are going to be times when development occurs that depart from this framework plan, and that's okay. When those issues contradict our comprehensive plan, amendments to those comprehensive plans will be necessary. But before those are proposed, or at least until those plans are reviewed again at a 10-year point, I don't think that we need to proactively run out and make all of those changes. I also tend to agree with what Mr. Yoshimura said, that I think the burden of getting us out of this conflict mess, if you will, should fall on staff and not on individual developers to help facilitate that process rather than to create an obstacle to that development that we want to see. So with that, I think some of the phases will clearly they stretch everyone's imagination. I'm most hopeful that the near-term phases are able to achieve some momentum within the city, that we're able to at least bite off some really necessary near-term projects that at least set us down a path for some improvements at Ship Creek. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Commissioner Spring?
I'll be supporting the motion also. I think it's an exciting plan. I mean, plan big, right? So it's a big plan, and if it comes to fruition, it's going to be a pretty exciting place to spend some time down there. I have some concerns with Phase 3, as some of the other members do. I just don't think that, given the constraints of the access to that area, that it's going to be a very viable development area. It's just there's other areas of town, even downtown has some problems with attracting development and office development, and it has good access. It has a grid system already in place, and hasn't been any development in downtown office-wise for years. The fact is that it's going out to Midtown because Midtown's more centrally located, cheaper land, of course. There's no parking, there's free parking, and this also has a great access. This access with Ship Creek Avenue, flyover, 4th Avenue flyover, it's going to take, it's going to take more time to get there from the rest of the town. It's at the very corner of the town, and the drive there is just going to be difficult, and there might be bottlenecks if you're going to have 2-lane roads coming in and out serving that many people. It's going to be congested probably, and it's just a difficult, I mean, you did your best job, I think, to provide access to the area. It's a difficult problem, and I don't think it's solved by the 2 access that you recommended. I don't know if it could be solved, but I'm not going to vote against it. I'll be willing to lend you a try to solve it.
Any other comment? Ms. Robinson, would you please restate your motion for the board?
Sure. I believe, and I believe it is in the matter case 2014-033 Ship Creek Framework Plan, to recommend adoption of the plan as currently presented to us, along with staff recommendations in the packet, and as well as the issue response table.
Thank you. We have a motion before us. Let's vote. Use your machines, please. Motion passes. Oops. Pardon me. No, it's right. I'm going to reset the vote because we got the wrong motion on it. Okay. Can you? You can't. We're stuck with the machine. Okay, we're going back to the thumbs up, thumbs down.
Do we need to unplug this? Is that what the problem is?
No, it's us.
Amended mode. You want to vote no?
You got John Spring is the problem.
Well, it didn't even get voted on, really.
Yeah, that's correct, but I'm trying to reset it. No. Okay. I think it is our system. I don't think it is your system. Okay. All in favor of, well, God, this is unfair for a first-time chairman. I want to state that clearly for the record. Who's ever doing this is good. We're going to lecture about this later on. Okay. We're going to, even though this is motion to amend, mover John Spring, this is Tyler's motion, and we're going to vote on Tyler's motion. Use your machines. All right, the motion is passed. Okay, now, findings, people.
Mr. Chair, I believe that that's what I was speaking to before I voted.
I'm checking, Mr. Robinson. Mr. Spring, do you have any findings you want to add? Okay. That closes the issue on case 2014-033, the Ship Creek Framework Plan. In the audience, would you please be orderly as you exit the building? I will read the appeal process, and then we're going to talk about committee assignments. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable, which is what we just voted on. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution in which the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Okay, commissioners, on the back page, or next to back page of the agenda is a list of committee assignments. We have had at least 3, if not 4, commissioners added to this body since we last visited this this item. And so I would invite the newer commissioners to express a pleasure on which bodies they would like to serve. And we also have the design criteria manual, wetlands, and fees that we need to do something about. The one that has been working the longest, I think, is AMATS, and that's John Spring, and he gives us a report, and I do appreciate your service on that one. Title 21 Committee, we have Robinson. Does anyone else want to?
Well, if I may,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, there is no Title 21 committee. I mean, I think we, indicated that as we moved forward and tested the new code, there might be opportunities that we would dive in at a subcommittee level, and that's why it's there. But just to be clear, at least my understanding is I'm not doing anything formally on this other than working through the new code through my own projects on my own time and realizing that there are some issues that need to be worked out.
I would maybe suggest that we contact staff and ask, how is the new Title 21 working? Are there problems that are coming? And I don't know whether there are or not. I keep hearing of some, but then they seem to go away. So I would like to know at some later date how that's working. Okay. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be appropriate to ask staff, Erica, actually, Ms. McConnell, to give us all a report on Title 21 what sort of issues they may have come up with or what sort of amendments are forthcoming.
I doubt if you're ready for tonight, but at some future meeting, could you handle that, please?
Of course.
Thank you very much. Design Criteria Manual Committee is Robinson and Ferguson, and Robinson's been covering all the meetings for us again, and will give us a report right now, right, Tyler?
Since I am so busy with Title 21 Committee, I'd like to remove myself from the Design Criteria Manual Committee.
Only if we can get 2 replacements.
Well, is that committee ongoing? I mean, I know we've had Mr. Thompson
Sooner or
come
later, the
forward.
Design Criteria Manual will come before us. Okay?
And then you want me to deal with the whole, I want off that thing now.
Commissioner Ferguson, it's my understanding that the engineers are meeting, every couple of weeks and going chapter by chapter, line by line, comma by comma. And so are you suggesting that someone needs to attend those meetings?
Occasionally.
Yeah, and I simply don't have time in my day. I think they're during the day as well, and
Okay.
I'm booked.
If we don't get enough volunteers, I'm going to start drafting people. So, but let's go over the holes here, and we'll see what we can do. Long-range plan, RFP, policies and procedures. Dean and Yoshimura.
I've sort of given up on that.
I don't believe we ever made any progress.
Right. Well, we do have spreadsheets now, or we did, about, what the various plans are and where the income for those plans have come from and what the status is and all that sort of thing. So I actually think we've made a lot of progress. Carol, Ms. Wong, when's the last time we updated that?
I think probably last quarter was when that
Last
was
quarter, right.
I do have one comment to make. Carol and I did meet and go over the procedures and policies and how things go through the system. And maybe it might help all of us to hear a little bit more about how we end up at the point of getting a plan here. What happens before it comes to us and the steps that take place, and that was really interesting to hear how it went through. Since I've never worked for the city, I don't understand the whole procedure for that. It was very interesting.
Maybe we can fit that in on a director's luncheon or a work session or something.
We could fit that in a director's lunch. Probably not this Thursday, but a future one.
Yeah. Ahead.
Commissioner Ferguson, I have to say that it is becoming increasingly difficult, at least for me, to attend the director's lunch. And for some of these reports, I actually would like to suggest that maybe we do a 5:30 meeting. I think that's probably a little more convenient for some commissioners than trying to get to the planning department during the middle of the day on Tudor Road.
I was going to suggest on Thursday that we discuss that, the day of the week and the time, and seeing what fits for everybody involved and on that.
I saw several people nod their head that 5:30 is probably a better time. Most of us just sort of hang around trying to figure out what to do after work until we can get here at 6:30.
The evening's already dead at that
Yeah,
point.
it's
You
dead.
might
Yeah,
really-
it's dead. You don't have time to get home. You don't really have time to eat. You just sort of, maybe you could drink, but, that wouldn't be appropriate. So we just sort of figure out what to do here.
We take care of the drinking before the 5:30 meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right.
I don't like the 5:30 meeting when we go to midnight. When we go to 9:30, they're not packed. When we go to midnight, that makes a long night. Permitting process streamlining committee, that's mine. For various reasons, I haven't done it, but I think I'm going to be able to get some time to work on it, and I have not ignored that one. AMATS committee. John, you're doing a good job on that right now.
I think there needs to be 2, however, because there will be conflicts where I can't really deal with an issue because I might be involved with it or under contract to work on something. So it'd be good to have somebody else.
Ms. Barker and Greg and Brandon haven't volunteered yet. and I've got that, we will, we'll work to even out this workload on that. Airport Master Plan Committee, Dean?
Yep, I've been on Merrill Field with Carol Wong for, how long have we been doing it now, Carol? It's been a while.
Over a year.
Yeah, yeah.
But
so
we don't have anybody at International any longer.
No.
And that's probably an issue.
it's yeah. Dana and Terry were doing it before.
Yeah, they both left.
And that's a regular meeting? The,
Regularly, I don't know.
I mean, I haven't worked with the airport a fair amount. I'd be interested in attending if it's not an every month type thing.
Why don't you contact Mr. Parks or Mr. Cruz and ask what it was, and then let us know. Whether it's once every 6 months or something. I don't know. I don't know how often they meet.
Okay.
I thought that was to follow the plan, the master plan. Wasn't that the intent of that committee assignment?
The airport master plan.
The airport master plan. So it would be a one-shot deal, basically, once.
I think they have some ongoing committees as well, so I'm not sure what the intent is with that.
Seems to me it was an ongoing one, and I think the master plan is under a constant state of renewal.
I don't know where it is. I know they've done a lot of work on it. It should be coming up for adoption pretty soon, I would think.
Okay, the UMed district plan. Ms. McConnell, I think, are we done with that now, the UMed plan, or where is that now?
I defer that question to Ms. Wong.
Ms. Wong?
That plan is currently under development right now. They just finished developing the profile and existing conditions report, and so they've concluded their public process and taking all the comments they've gotten from that, as well as from the stakeholders in UMed. They're now drafting the chapters of the draft plan.
Is there a point in which we should have a committee there, or is it going on?
I would say when the plan comes out for public review, it might be a good time to have a committee at that point. And we expect a document maybe September of this year.
Okay. I would invite those that aren't on a committee to decide which one they'd like to be on and volunteer sooner than later, or else we may have to draft somebody. Ms. Barker?
Well, I appreciate the rundown on what the different committees entail, because I hadn't had that information before.
I understand that.
I would be willing to work with Commissioner Spring on AMATs. I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm not sure what the time commitment is. I think that's kind of the black box here for me.
I can comment on that.
Okay.
I think the best thing to do would be to every month look at the calendar they have published on their website, the municipality of Anchorage, and just see what the agenda is. And if you think there's something that would be of interest land use wise or planning wise, then you might want to attend. We'll talk about whether we should attend that meeting, one of us.
Okay, with your seasoned judgment, I'd be happy to be your cohort.
Most of the time, it doesn't. Their agenda is so light, and it's not necessary to attend. But
I noticed this week's got canceled. Mr. Barker or Mr. Walker?
Well, I guess if we need somebody to volunteer for UMed, I represent Providence and I'm involved out there, so it might be appropriate. I don't know what the time.
Since that doesn't start till September, you're still available for something else.
That's perfect. I'm all in. Move on.
One point I was going to make earlier is on the disclosures. It's my intent to have the various commissioners handle the disclosures as sort of a training exercise. Commissioner Dean handled it tonight. Commissioner Robinson will handle it next week, and then Commissioner Spring will follow behind that, and then to Strike, and then to Barker, and then to Walker. Just to work through and give everybody a little bit of experience of slaughtering the various parts of the agenda that I do. And it's just a training on it and get everybody experience to try to handle that. Ms. Dean.
I had a suggestion for additional committees that we might want to talk about potentially. One of those would be some kind of an interaction with the assembly. We're kind of over here and we send our stuff off and we never know what happens to it afterwards. And it might be helpful if we were to interact at some level with the assembly. Not quite sure how to do it, but just throwing it out there.
I'm certain the attorney would give us advice on how not to do it. Ms. Yoshimura.
Oh, well, I think that should be the responsibility of the chair or the vice chair. Seems logical to me. Yeah, you can ping pong that one back and forth. Yeah.
Ms. Dean and I will appoint a chair, appoint somebody to handle that with the assembly. Don't worry. We could do that one. Okay. Go ahead.
And then I do think that a wetlands committee is very important. I think that has really significant impact in the future for development within the Anchorage Bowl. I would volunteer to serve on that committee and try to establish some interaction. I do understand from our agenda that there is a joint session with the Assembly on the wetlands plan for Good Friday, a week from this coming Friday. I did send a message to Ernie Hall saying, really, are you going to have a meeting then? So I haven't heard back, so.
He may be waiting to see who will be the next chair, or if it's him or somebody else on that one. Let's add air quality to the wetlands issue.
What?
What? Dust control? Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah,
I had a speculation on that. You know, you've got a junior high school right next door to that project, and I was wondering if maybe it wasn't derivative of that. I mean, it's clearly it's not something they normally require. So.
Well, I don't appreciate various bodies adding requirements to the projects. There's a procedure for that, and if they follow it, that's fine. But just to come in and out of the blue add a requirement is not quite. And then I can just see what happens with the dust blowing off the road. Is that your dust or the city's dust? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to follow up on that.
Would you please?
And bring back some information on that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it was totally.
I'm on the Air Quality Committee after all.
Okay. Good deal.
So.
Unless somebody has something else to add, the chair would welcome a motion for adjournment.
Do I have is there a volunteer?
Ms. Wong is waving her hand over there, Mr. Chair.
Something to consider. The Fairview Neighborhood Plan will be presented next week as a public hearing item. And we also understand that Mountain View is also working on a neighborhood plan that will be coming to the Planning Commission in the future. They haven't told the Planning Department when they plan to submit that. So those are two neighborhood plans that this body may or may not need to have a committee to look further into them. Just wanted to put that out there.
There are more plans being done, and I recognize you guys don't have anything to do with some of these, but there are an awful lot of plans. And somebody made the comments, we've been, sort of poor establishing boundaries, and yet we continue to do the same issue again and again and again. Okay. Ms. Yoshimura, you wanted help on the wetlands?
Right, because my term ends in October, and I think we won't probably have a wetlands plan, maybe or maybe not, in place by then.
That'd be a good one for Greg.
That's a good idea. Yeah, he's not here.
He's not here. I'll write him an email. Congratulating you on his appointment. Now, may I have a motion for adjournment, please? Ms. Dean, I need a second. Thank you. Any objection? Drive carefully, everyone out there, please.